You are.
Okay, my goodness, what a struggle. Okay, Sarah, good morning. I'm thankful for getting us all organized. So, all right, now I have it figured out. We're on Microsoft Teams. Sarah, can I use this link from now on, or we need a new one each week?
Yeah, sure. The same link.
The same one each week.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we are recording.
Yeah.
All
I can
right.
start. Thank God.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Let's. All right. All right. Let's begin with the same question I had before. A little delayed, but education is never delayed. Learning does never stop. It continues until the very end. All right. Are there any questions about any of the material we've discussed so far? If there's any questions at all, once again, you could always email me. Let me know that you have emailed me, because I don't check. Oops, we lost that for a second. Oops, we lost that. Okay. Okay. All right. I did notice that I lost the. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. I lost the PowerPoint presentation. All right, give me a second to get that back up, please. Okay, there we go. All right. Today's topic is the role of government in real estate. There are three governments to take a look at, or each one has a different role. You have the federal government, you have the state government, and then you have local governments. The local government in the U.S., each of the states is divided into counties. So I believe in the U.S. there's about 3,000 of them. Each county would be the equivalent of the local real estate authority. Excuse me. Then you have the state, each one with different regulations. Then you have the federal government. The federal government has a somewhat limited role in the setting of real estate policy, with the exception of one area, and that is federal legislation. The federal government has a number of laws regarding environmental protections. For example, we have the Clean Air Act. This you will find on page 82, 83 of the text. Clean Air Act, Clean Water, Safe Drinking, Toxic Substance Control Act. So you have the federal government involved in more legislative matters. And when the federal government passes a law, each of the states and the local jurisdictions are expected to follow. Federal law in the U.S. supersedes laws at any other level. Other than the legislation, the federal government is not really involved very much in the practice or application of real estate, with one exception. Well, one main exception. There are a few, I guess, but the one that I wish to bring to your attention has to do with the sale of property and what has to be disclosed by the seller when the seller wishes to sell a property. It used to be, until the 1980s or 1990s, much of business in the U.S. was influenced by a Latin phrase, caveat emptor, which sort of meant buyer beware. If the seller wants to sell anything from property to a car to an appliance to whatever it might be, it is the buyer's responsibility to do his or her own due diligence, to check to be sure that what is being sold is in good condition, or if it isn't, at least the buyer understands or can see clearly what needs to be replaced or repaired. It's not uncommon at all that someone buys a used car that might not be running very well. The price is reduced because of that, and the buyer, okay, buys it and then invests the money to repair it. However, there was one case that's changed the way real estate is sold. A seller sold a house and said the house was in good condition. The buyer looked at it and said, okay, I'll buy it. The first bad rainstorm and water started leaking in through the windows, around the window edges, and flooded the house. Well, the buyer sued the seller and said, I want my money back because you did not tell me that in bad rainstorms, this house leaks. And the seller said, sorry, caveat emptor, you're supposed to check it out. Anything that happened, we attempted to repair it, but the house is still in good condition. Well, the buyer didn't accept that as an excuse, went to the court, and the court at the highest levels ruled that yes, the seller has to inform the buyer of everything that the seller knows needs repair or is defective. This is the concept called disclosure. So in practice, all realtors have learned from the very beginning that the realtor representing a seller must disclose everything that they know about the house, repairs that were made, or even repairs that the seller may not wish to repair at this moment, but at least is telling the buyer that there's a problem over here. In real estate, in the practice of real estate, very often a buyer conducts an inspection, which is legally permitted, it's in the contract. The buyer finds something wrong, and the seller says, okay, I will give you, the roof leaks, okay, I will give you a credit of, let's say, $10,000 for you to fix the roof once you take possession. So let's say the home would sell for $300,000. So the seller gives the buyer $10,000 for the repair. So the buyer will be paying $300,000 minus $10,000. So the buyer will be paying $290,000, and that $10,000 difference is supposed to be towards the repair of the roof. This is a concept known as disclosure. It's a very important concept in real estate. If a seller does not know, a realtor does not know there is a problem, then they cannot be held responsible. But it is the seller's responsibility. And now the seller may not often know the rules. This is why the realtor must inform the seller, if you're representing the seller, that anything the matter with the house must be disclosed. There's certain exceptions. If a person passes away in a home, you don't have to say that someone died here and it was a tragic accident, or somebody was killed in the home. That does not have to be reported, because that's not something regarding the structure of the home. Something happened within, was unfortunate, but does not have to be revealed. Okay, that being said, let's take the federal government out of the conversation for a while, and let's take a look at the role of the state and the local governments regarding real estate. Okay, government eminent domain, we mentioned that last week, we'll see it again today, occurs when the government simply says, I need your house. We want to build a road right through it. Your house is in the way, so, excuse me, let's negotiate, give you a price for your home, and we'll take it. Private limitations on ownership, liens, we discussed liens last week. A lien is a debt owed on the property. Remember what I was saying, a buyer that wants to buy a home should check with the intermediary, the closing agent, the person that will conduct a transaction, who can do it better than you as the buyer, to make sure there are no liens on the house, because if there's any liens, that means that the buyer, without knowing it, walks into a new house and faces a debt that he or she did not incur.
Professor, are you showing his
Yes.
slide? Are you sharing his slide or no?
I'm sorry?
Are you sharing his slide or no?
Yeah, I'm on the slide too. Can you see the slide?
No, I cannot see in my side.
Okay,
No.
can anyone see? No one can see, okay, well, all right, okay, I see it, I see it. All right,
Sorry for the interruption, Professor.
no, not at all. Okay, can you see it now?
Still no?
Okay, because I am hitting the share button and it doesn't seem to, um, um, okay. Okay, can you see it now?
No.
Okay, I don't know. Sarah, are you with us? Because I'm not getting, I'm hitting the share button, but it doesn't seem to, all right, I'm sorry, I don't know. I've hit the share and share content and it doesn't seem to. Is that any better?
Oh, yes, there is.
You got it? Okay. All right. That was strange. I kept hitting the share button. All right. Okay. The government at the local level, the state and local government has control then over the use of land within its jurisdiction. Okay, in this case, the federal government just steps away. The only control they have or influence has to do with the federal legislation. For example, as I said, the clean air, the clean water, which all of the jurisdictions, the states and the local jurisdictions have to abide by. They can't ignore them. Um, so in terms of real estate, we're talking about the state and the county, the local jurisdictions. They are the ones who have control over the way that land is used in those communities. Let me just point out too that these slides are in the in Moodle. I have uploaded them as well. So once we're finished, you can view them when you review the class. Okay. All right. Again, there's actually about 75 slides, so let me just sort of stay with the ones that have any significance for us. Sometimes the system of implementing control over the use of land is not is not a perfect system. Um, the committees or the elected officials that decide what should be placed here. Is it only a residential community? Is it what they call mixed use situation, which is residential and commercial properties side by side? In many locations, you'll see commercial properties on the ground floor, so people could walk into them, and then apartments or condos on top of the commercial establishment. Um, the process of deciding what goes where and how it's used is not a perfect science. The people that decide are local officials, the elected officials. Uh, Many of them are business owners or own properties, and uh, very often how they decide is influenced by by the protection of their own interests. So um, again, this slide just points out that uh, there could be some uh, failures. The word externality is used from the very beginning. That's sort of the unintended consequences of decisions. It's not intended, of course, in any way to decide upon something that causes harm to someone else or causes damage to someone else. But it's an imperfect system, and very often what was decided in good faith produces some problems in other areas. As pointed out here, traffic, storm runoff, emissions, urban sprawl, just the design of it is sort of wasn't put together design of communities. Uh, but again, the local officials that decide how land will be used are just regular people, residents of an area that wish to have a voice in how that community is developed. But very often, oops, where'd you go? Very often their decisions don't work out as intended. Um, it's kind of easier. I have a bird's eye view living in Florida, in the southern part of Florida, where much of Florida at this point was simply swamp. It was the only ones who lived there were mosquitoes and animals, and a number of developers came in with visions of how this area should be developed, drained the swamps, cleaned up the property, and in place built that 1,000, 2,000 unit developments. Some of them worked out fine, some didn't. Uh, some externalities occurred, unintended consequences. But again, this is the way the system works. It's not perfect, and it has to be it's sort of judged accordingly. Traditional land use controls, use of zoning is one way of doing this. What can be permitted in certain areas. Uh, I'm on actually, I should point this out on page, I can move this over a little bit. Okay, there you go. Um, Page just 71 of the text, that the planning of local areas is affected by the planning commission, zoning, and building codes that might be applied to certain areas. Again, this is all under the control of either the state or the local uh, local county officials. Again, I see this as a really bird's eye view is very close to it, because much of the area that I live in and its surrounding was really undeveloped land as recently as maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So you can see how these decisions were made, some of the mistakes that were made in planning. But again, as long as the decisions that were made were done honestly and not to protect someone's business interests, one has to accept that, okay, this is the way it is, and let's see if we can correct it. Okay, we're not interested too much in fires. Okay. But we do have here in Florida and in many areas of the lower part of the U.S. is hurricanes, and let's just stay with the where'd we go? Hurricane Andrew in, I think it was 1989, a very powerful storm came, and as you might be able to see from this picture, building codes establish minimum requirements. You could see that the structure of the home, the border of the home is in cement blocks or prefabricated cement blocks, big ones, walls. But the roofs were all wood, and they were not secured very strongly. And the hurricane just blew off the roofs of I don't know how many homes, but it was really quite a disaster there. From this incident, and regretfully in life, changes occur only after a disaster occurs and not before, which is the way it ought to be done. Florida implemented much stronger business building codes, and every few years they upgrade them and improve them. So as a consequence really of the first really bad one, Andrew, I believe in 1989, the building codes in Florida was strengthened. The passage of a hurricane is still going to cause tremendous damage, because not everyone could live in well constructed homes. Not everyone has the income to do so, but again, the codes at least have been strengthened. Okay, the traditional land use control zoning, the local zoning board, each of these local communities will form a zoning board, and they will use a system that's relevant for them. In this case, we have classifications: residential, commercial, industrial, automotive, setbacks, where is the structure placed, how is it placed, how many can be there, and what can be there, special use districts. Okay, so once again, we're talking about government's role in real estate. The federal government has somewhat a limited role, limited only to legislation, to laws that apply to everyone, regardless of where you are, and as well as real estate and other related areas, industries. Most of the control over real estate, the development of real estate, what goes where, is left to the state or to the local community. Probably more emphasis placed on the local community, since they know their area better than the state. States, of course, can be very large. Florida is a very large state. Imagine a laws in California or Texas, very large states. Sometimes what is good for one part of the state is not good for another part. Temperatures vary, rainfall varies. The amount of people living in certain areas vary. So that's why real estate rules, regulations usage of the property of the land there is left to the legislators most closely located with or attached to that particular area. Okay, traditional land use control, subdivision, features of subdivision. These are some of the things they control: the streets, the sewers, the water, the drainage. Okay, this is again not anything that one has to put to memory. It's unlikely I would ever ask this of you on an exam of some sort. Traditional land use controls the Planning and Zoning Commission, as I'm saying, administration. The local Planning and Zoning Commission creating the zoning ordinance. As I mentioned, these are appointed by elected officials. Sometimes they're, again, ultimately advisory to elected officials, would serve a few, maybe a 2-year term or a 4-year term or something. You know, this is democracy, so everyone is sort of gets elected or appointed in some way. But again, people are going to be people, and people that may have businesses or property in a certain community are perhaps more likely to become members of these administrations, and therefore can exert their preferences more easier than anyone else. And it's always left to someone who has a complaint about the way their community is run to simply say, well, the next time elections are being held, I'm going to run, excuse me, as a member of my local board. So it's up to every citizen to feel if they want a voice that they are can put their name in consideration for a position on the zoning commission or any local board that might apply to them. Okay, a board of adjustment, a typical owning. Some of these things, you have boards that determine things, and then you have boards to determine conflicts among certain communities, or sometimes, let's say, a road runs through different communities, or a road runs through different counties. I live down here in Collier County. I can go 15 miles up the road, and take one step, and I'm in Lee County. Lee County has different taxes than Collier County. Many people prefer to be in Collier County because the taxes in Lee County are a little bit more than the taxes in Collier County. There's one community here in northern part of Naples, where I live, where one side of the street, the homes on one side of the street are located in one county, and the homes on the other side of the street are located in another county. And actually, people that know better would prefer to be on one side of the street than the other. They prefer being in one county than the other because of the taxes. Now, the taxes become a function of how many people live in that county. More people live there, more people paying taxes, more money goes into the local treasury. Fewer people living in one area, well, perhaps the more they would have to pay on an individual basis for that county to administer itself. Elected officials, fire, police, that sort of thing. Eventually or ultimately, if there's any real difficulty, someone could always sue the local board, the planning board, the zoning board. The courts will ultimately decide. But notice that decisions are final rather than advisory. You have to have some ability to say, okay, well, this is it. This road goes only this far, or this road will turn or do whatever, or this will be a mixed use. It'll be residential and commercial. And if someone says, no, I only want it to be commercial, not residential, well, the court system in this country will resolve it. This is a very litigious country, and people sue at the drop of a hat, but at least that is open to someone who does not agree with the decision. Okay, you have, again, planning board. The planning board is sort of the central organization that decides on the use of real estate in the community within the planning board. Then you'll have a zoning commission and a site plan review. This is stuff I actually would never ask you on an exam. It's really not, it's not really relevant to us. Again, because to me, as an educator here, teaching you the basics of real estate, there are things that I would like you to remember more so than other matters. And the things I would like you to remember would be the ones that I will emphasize. And the ones that are more likely for you to remember would be those related to the practice of real estate. So I can, not that any of you may desire to be a realtor one day, but at least you'll understand what the steps and the process necessary to own real estate. You may buy your own home one day simply as a resident. You may have, for those of you that may have families and kids, maybe buying and selling, moving to a different location because of employment. It's kind of important to understand the purchasing of real estate. This is important, but really more at the elective level. If you wish to be an official, then study this area so you know it well. Okay, oops. Okay, zoning again is a responsibility of the community to decide what will go in certain areas. Non-conforming use is the use of when someone, let's say we mentioned this, I believe, last week. The planning board decides that this area will be developed and will be for residential development only. However, this is a rural road, and right next to it is a gas station that's been there for many years. And the developer wants to develop homes there and says, no, we can't continue with a gas station that's been there forever. That would be considered a non-conforming use. That owner of the gas station can simply say, I've been here longer than the developer has been here, and I wish to stay. I lost that slide for a second. Oh, here it is, non-conforming use. In other words, that gas station would not conform to the zoning classification of that area, because that area has now been zoned as residential, but you have a commercial property there, gas station. If that's the case, that gas station owner would have to file for a variance and simply say, listen, I was here before he was, I'm not obligated to sell, and most likely would be given the opportunity to continue. However, as long as that man was operating the gas station, he'd be allowed to stay. The moment he sold it, or the moment perhaps he passed away, then that property could be purchased or would not be allowed to continue as a commercial property. In other words, it would be okay as long as the owner was alive and operating the business. And that would be considered a situation of non-conforming use. A particular property that is not conforming to what the zoning classification called for, but was still allowed to remain as long as the owner continued with the business. Okay, there are variance exception to the requirements. This really makes no sense to me. It says the zoning raised the cost of housing. This sort of is maybe a discussion at a very high philosophical level. on one side is people who say we should do whatever we want, build whatever we want. We don't have anyone telling us what to do. And then you have someone saying, well, listen, you just can't do anything that you want in this area because someone will have a home and someone will put a factory right next to the home, or a business that gives off gas or anything that could be considered perhaps dangerous, and the homes right next to it. So we do need some control over where certain properties are built, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial. The difference between commercial, industrial, commercial are stores where we go to buy things pretty much every day. Industrial would be perhaps factories. In Florida, because it's mostly all sand, you have a number of cement factories, convert sand into cement. I wouldn't want to be living next to one. But again, this particular statement or slide is saying, is really zoning necessary? Does it raise the cost? I think most people would generally agree that some sort of review or jurisdiction has to be given to a community to decide what's the best use of land within that particular community. The placement of schools, the placement of parks, recreational areas would never occur if people did whatever they want. You wouldn't think of that. But when you develop a property, the state demands that some area be left for recreation. That's one of the benefits of having a state or local community involved in the planning of a particular location. Pre-1970, this again is pretty much the time that, a little bit later actually, that the federal government ruled that if you want to sell a property and there's been some repairs or damage to the property, you have to inform the buyer. The buyer has to be informed that this happened. That's called disclosure. So in this case, you see 1970, before that, no land use was really, again, it was simply everybody did what they want, caveat emptor, your job to do some investigation if you want to buy a property. But then following that, the federal government and the local governments began to be more involved. And the local government's involvement in the development of land use is what helped develop. South Florida would be, as it was 100 years ago, just a swamp area. I'm referring to South Florida, if not for the development and the planned development of various communities, because you had swamps. It was swamps, mosquitoes, alligators. So someone had to come in and kind of clear that up, fill in the property, put sewage, put electricity, roads, and quite an investment, and then subsequently build residential commercial houses. But in the absence of some planning, something like that would never have occurred. This is a problem that does affect us down here in Florida. Urban planning for stormwater management in certain areas that actually would develop prior to, let's say, the 1970s, which is a lot of areas. A severe rainstorm can have flooding consequences, like these people walking over here in knee-deep water. I don't live far from places like this, that a bad storm can cause something like this to happen. A hurricane will cause terrible damage, like you see in this bottom one, or the one this lady looking out of a door she can't step. But this again speaks to the importance of urban planning, of community development. The same thing can be said of northern communities in the U.S. that perhaps get a lot of snow, freezing weather. The weather plays a substantial role. It impacts the development of land use in pretty much every area. Each area would have its distinct implications. Let's say the South, especially the area of Florida, we get a lot of rain. The West Coast, or let's say the mountain area, the absence of rain, all of that, there's currently fights going on in let's say Arizona, for those of you familiar with that area a bit, Arizona, Colorado, about water. As Phoenix, Arizona expanded, I read recently, into more of the desert area, the city had not yet developed a way of bringing water out to these new communities, out pretty much miles, not you'd want to walk it, but maybe 10 miles, 15 miles outside of the city. So residences in those areas have to rely on water trucks that drive out there and fill their cisterns. That's not really quite pleasant, not to be able to. I mean, you have water. If you, for some reason, you used it up, you don't have any water for a few days until the truck comes out again and fills your cistern. So some areas have problems with water. Some have too much water, as we have here in Florida. And this, of course, speaks to the importance of having management of both land and water, as well as air, of course, in the hands of responsible government officials. California has traffic. Look at this, not a very pleasant area. Urban planning needed for schools, services. Is comprehensive planning the answer? I'll kind of repeat what I've just been saying. When individual people are only pursuing their own interests, again, it's the community is going to be missing some things like schools or water management or parks or recreation, everyone pursuing their own interests. So there needs to be some managed growth of communities. And as I'm saying that, especially here for those of us living in South Florida, which wasn't that long ago, simply undeveloped property. It doesn't go back that far. Where I live right now this community was built around the year 2000. A few years before that, they began draining some of the area, replacing or placing sewage and electricity. So where I am is like 20 years ago, that this was nothing but swamp. So again, the development of substantial areas of land can best be managed when a centralized commission or commissions are elected by the people to manage that property. And hopefully it'll work out. Now, sometimes it doesn't always. That's why there are means by which people can request changes or challenge them, but it is what it is. Okay, the changing notion of best practice. What's the best solution? Okay, mixed density, mixed use. Okay, again, mixed density, mixed use, we refer to as mixed use would be a combination of both commercial and residential. Okay, limited actual experience, a little more than 30 years. Well, in most cases, you can't go back and say, well, this is what they did, 50 years ago. So why not use the same plan? Let's look in the files and take out the plan. Well, a lot of areas like where I am, there isn't any history. It's everything is pretty much pretty new. So sometimes plans may not have worked as planned as the original officials wanted. But again, as long as there's a a means by which corrective action could be taken. Pretty much anything can be repaired. Okay, this is sort of as I'm saying, contrasting what like was done previously, traditional versus new. Traditional, everybody does what they want. Automobile oriented. A cul-de-sac is sort of like a semicircle, where you have like homes in a semicircle, an entrance and homes in a, imagine a semicircle design, and then coming back out through the main street or whatever. A cul-de-sac is somewhat similar to what you see quite a bit in Europe. The way I know them is roundabouts. I'm not sure if that's the correct term. You see them quite a bit in France, where instead of, let's say, a stoplight, a traffic light, uh, people coming in different directions have to go around a circle to where they want to digress to go out, and hoping each one has some respect for the other person in the in the entering the circle. But a cul-de-sac is somewhat of a half circle with homes around. Now, some communities will have cul-de-sac design, but it's mostly all developments are simply conventional streets with houses on either side. But a cul-de-sac is kind of just a unique way of having a few houses. Some people prefer it. Some people don't really care for it. The traditional over here, as you can see, is just pure residential. And then in these two slides over here, you could see, not clearly, but the ground floor is going to be commercial. Businesses operating out of the ground floor over here, and then families living on top, residential properties on top. They refer to that as the new urban. That's also called mixed use properties. I guess the referral to new urban means that it's sort of a structure you see as if it was a home, but a number of families can live within a structure. Each one has their own apartment. I guess that would be considered new urban because you're building vertically as opposed to single family homes horizontally. Oops, going back, oops. This is the one. This would be sort of traditional. Each family has their own home. Each structure has one family. This we said was the new urban, but this would be considered, I guess, building vertically as opposed to horizontally. So in this particular structure, which I think goes from, if you can see the arrow, you may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 units in one structure. They say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 structures, maybe 7 or 8 families in just these 5 homes. Critical questions, will land use solve market failures? No one knows the answer to these questions. At what level should control be imposed? Well, what works should be continued, what doesn't work should be changed. The quality of any organization, the management of any corporation, from Google to a local store, is a function of the competence of the management. Every day we see questionable management, the company's decisions that we kind of scratch our heads. I will mention them, some of them that come to my mind when I think of of them. But decision making is a quality of the competence of the decision makers and how well they analyze the situation, they do their due diligence, such that again, the more information taken into consideration when decisions are made, will likely reduce the probability of a bad decision. Okay, newer approach to land use, a planned unit development, referred to in everyday real estate as a PUD, PUD. It's a development plan, a detailed plan. It outlines any area that may be mixed use, mixed density, meaning some areas the community may have, let's say, very expensive homes to moderately priced homes to less priced homes. The more expensive the home, the more likely the home will have more space to work with. It'll be a bigger home. So that's what many of the communities in South Florida are like. You'll have small condos, medium-sized condos, small homes, large-sized homes. The density varies, and also the appeal to the resident varies. The higher the income the person, the more likely they prefer something bigger and more expensive. Open community, no standard setbacks, meaning how far back from the road, kind of depends. Open spaces, recreation areas. It's sort of like a self-contained little city. Some of them, there's one that's not far from where I am, has a gas station inside the community, has a beauty salon, has stores, and I believe has a branch of a particular bank there, as well as all of the recreational activities that people might like, the golf and the tennis. And they often have restaurants as well. So they're often sort of self-contained cities. The only thing you have to do is go out to buy groceries, but many of them are pretty much, well, even today you can order out, right? And have a grocery store delivered to you. So in a way, many of these, again, communities are, I would refer specifically to planned unit development communities, PUDs, are really somewhat self-contained. And to people who are retired or seniors that really don't want to be going out shopping or don't like to go very far for a restaurant or for women to have their hair done, walking 5 minutes over to the beauty salon is a pretty nice deal. Okay, this is your kind of the traditional community we saw in the previous slide, the homes over here. And this would be an example of a PUD, this whole space over here. You can't see very clearly, but the homes would be different, would be situated differently. This would be a golf course located within the community for people who enjoy golf. There'd be tennis courts someplace off in a distance, but this is totally planned. If you ever see one in the planning phases, it shows the size of the lot. We actually saw that last week in one of the slides. And this is very often what the state is requesting before it approves development, that they see a planned unit development, a PUD map, which is quite popular here in the current way of doing developments here in Florida. There we go, flood housing development. You can see also from this map that the houses don't necessarily face each other, because at least it'll give, this would be, I'm sure, a relatively expensive community. Notice the water. This would be water between the houses, so people aren't staring into the homes of their neighbors. They're somewhat separated as best they could. This is typical of the developments here in South Florida. Some of the, again, the areas in which local commissioners can get involved in storm runoff, noise, traffic, all of these things are part of their domain. Okay, what they could charge, in order to make some revenue in all of this, the planning boards often charge impact fees. The cost of doing business here and of submitting plans, you have to submit the check with it as well, so that the state or county can generate some income from the development. These are referred to as impact fees. Okay, zoning, the city forms differing areas. Each area would have a zoning classification. Again, just I wouldn't ask you to memorize this or just to be aware of it. Decisions that that the local planning board will discuss. Neighborhood shops versus large urban stores versus shopping centers. Okay, all of these are decisions that will be made at pretty much the local level. For anyone just wanting a little bit more information, on the bottom over here, you'll see Denver, which is a really big city, but here's some of the codes available. And then for Miami, the one over here. Some areas you can't really kind of build horizontally because of space, even though this shows horizontal, but over here you'll see, as we saw in the previous slide, sort of vertical building, because there wasn't really that much available land. I picked up on this at the beginning of our session today, referring to the various laws that the federal government gets involved in. This is, again, really the most significant area in which the federal government is involved, and that's in environmental legislation. But the development of property at the local level is left to the state, and I'm saying, and to the local communities. With one major exception, as I also said before, is the federal law regarding disclosure. That isn't, just to be precise, isn't a law. It was a court decision that ruled in favor of the buyer of the home that, once it started raining, became flooded because the window, the window, surrounding window was weakened over time and water would rush in. And they said the seller never advised them that was the case. If it was, they would not have bought the property, or would have insisted that the seller replace the windows in some way. So that area known as disclosure is the result of a court case, but not a legal case, not a law, rather. Some hazardous materials that can be found in construction. One of the, we don't really see much of this in residential construction here in Florida, South Florida, simply because most of the construction is, as I'm saying, fairly new, maybe about 20 years, 25 years, and this wasn't used in construction. Something that we experience quite often are these two substances, radon and mold. Radon is a gas that is formed underneath the surface. Uh, South Florida is, for the most part, all sand. Uh, and that gas comes up through the sand and comes into homes. Uh, Extended exposure to this gas can actually be fatal. Um, Homeowners uh, are recommended to open their windows, their sliding doors as much as possible to prevent any buildup of radon that might be in someone's home. Uh, in the field of real estate, for those of us that are realtors, um, we ask those people we know that are here just for winter, meaning they'll come down November, December, and then leave in March or April when the weather begins to get warmer up north, to have someone come into their home and open their doors or windows uh, frequently to allow any air, any radon that might have come in through the floor not to accumulate, because it can be fatal. Interestingly, uh, well, there is a test for radon. Some new buyers, and it's happened to me as a realtor, have said, I like this home, but I'd like to have it tested for radon. And I would give them the name of an inspector. They would call the inspector, they come in and they test if there's radon present. If there is, there are ways in which this can be mitigated. But interestingly, one apartment could have a higher level of radon than one right next to it. Why? It's just the composition of the ground underneath that apartment uh, may be sandier or coarser than the one right next to it, and we all have seen that. It's really quite unusual. So anyone living in Florida, especially the southern part of Florida, which is more sand than the northern area, should keep their windows open when possible. Now, when it's really very hot, you don't want to do that very often, but at least perhaps in the morning, or if you're up at night, unable to sleep, and it's not too hot, open your sliding doors, let some air come in, and you should be okay. You could always test for radon if you have suspect maybe you're not feeling well, headaches, some sort of muscular discomfort, to say, let me do a radon test. Maybe this place does have high levels of radon. Mold is a fungus that grows any place in Florida. It is a bacteria that grows when moisture has entered a structure. You could see it on the walls. You could see it any place. Excuse me, it's evident because it discolors the walls. It'll be like a blackened substance. And if you see it any place in a structure, excuse me, that place has mold. Mold can be mitigated, meaning removed. The longer it's been there, the more area it covers, the more difficult uh, but new buyers also will say when viewing a home, I'd like this home inspected for mold. I can't see it, but maybe it's there behind the wall or something. And the inspector has this sort of ultraviolet uh, gadget, and they shine it around, and they can see where moisture may be accumulating. Maybe if they can go behind a wall a bit and see where the pipes are. Sometimes there's a pipe that might be leaking. and you could see the presence of mold. If mold is not attended to, it will eat up and destroy a home entirely. There's cases that have made the local newspaper. A guy buys a multi-million-dollar home only to find out that it has mold, and the people who deal with it say, sorry, this house cannot be saved. The mold is every place. You can't do very much about it, and the whole home has to be brought down. Then there's legal issues of which I would not want to be part of, but yes, it does happen. This gets back to a point I just mentioned regarding people who aren't here full time, but are here just for a few months a year. That someone should be coming in and checking out their place. Maybe a sink has leaked. Maybe a toilet might be leaking. Maybe a door wasn't closed completely and some rain entered in. A fellow I know came back as the weather got cooler in November. Many of the homeowners come down around November to South Florida, and said that there was mold all through the carpeting. Evidently, a door had not been closed. Some rainwater came in, and the mold grew. And he had a big problem, had to replace all of the carpeting. Again, okay, is there a limit to regulation? As I said, there's government, again, government use of laws to regulate, and then there's individuals' rights to question, to go to court and do things like that. So is there a limit? Probably the answer isn't, except when it imposes, it breaks laws. It should never do anything like that. But is there a limit? That's really no answer to that question. We talked about this before, eminent domain, where the government says it wants your property because it needs to build a road, it needs to build a water sanitation or something, and we need your place. There's always been a conflict between those who feel that the government should not intervene in business or in the rights of individuals to have their own home and do what they want. And then there are other people that say that individual rights have to be again reduced in order for the greater public good. And courts have usually agreed, if the government presents a case, we need this property, that they will rule in favor of the local government. The owner of the property that's to be acquired is to receive a just compensation. That's also subject to debate, usually ends up in court, but that's the way that works. Okay, we'll leave some of the examples. Okay, another area in which the local government can regulate the use of land is through property taxes. The state can impose taxes, and the local communities or counties can impose taxes. Florida has a sales tax of 6%. That money goes to the state, but the local authorities at the local level determine the amount of the property tax. Each one of us who owns a property pays a property tax. That tax is referred to as an ad valorem tax. Many of you may be familiar with that term. Ad valorem means it is a percentage tax, a tax that varies according to some sort of metric. The more expensive the house, the higher your taxes will be. The lower the value of your house, the lower your taxes would be. Okay. However, people don't often understand that what they feel is the value of their homes. What people feel is the value of their homes is referred to as the market value. That's the value that people are willing to enter into transactions to buy or sell property. However, each county has a tax assessor, an office that manages taxes at the county level. They will do their own assessment of the value of your home. In almost all cases, which is fortunate for us as homeowners, the assessed value, the value in which our taxes will be based, is lower than the market value. So fortunately, it's not the opposite, where our taxes are based on the market value. The market value is what someone is willing to pay for a property. The tax man says, okay, I understand that can be a bit inflated. Market values go up and go down. So let's use the assessed value that my office determines. And so that is what's used to determine your taxes. The tax authority people are not supposed to operate as a major for-profit corporation does, in the sense of making as much money as they possibly can and not feeling funny about it. They're only supposed to tax you to the extent that it can manage that area's, okay, local government, services, police, fire, garbage, schools, things like that. So your assessed taxes go not for the purpose of how much money can the county make, but what is necessary to fund the services that any community should offer.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes, yes.
Yes. How do the property tax work? It depends on the market value or the appraisal value.
No, it doesn't depend on the market value. The market value is what someone is willing to pay for the property. The tax guy has his own formula for assessing the value of your home. It's actually somewhat of a secret, because many people say, why is my home assessed at this level? Even if you went over to the tax guy's office, you probably wouldn't get a straight answer. But fortunately, the assessed value of a home anyplace is less than what the market value is. So the tax guy comes along and sends us each year a value of our home, an assessed value of the home. And based on the assessed value, then we are supposed to pay a certain amount in property taxes.
Yeah,
But
because
it's
for
the
example,
assessed value.
the
It's the
appraisal
assessed,
value of the house is 1.2.
the present value, you're saying?
The appraisal value of the house is 1.2. And because
No.
it's a family friend, and they will just give it to me for 700. Which one is applied the property tax, for the 1.2 or the 700?
Okay, you can easily go on to into your community's tax office. It's open to every resident, has every right to do so, and you can see what the local authority believes your home is worth. That's called the assessed value, and that is the value in which your taxes will be based. The market value is what somebody feels that they're willing to pay for your home. Now, in good times, when, let's say last year, for example, we experienced a very high increase in the value of homes, the assessed value, yes, will go up, because it is related to the market value, but it is not the market value. It is much less than what the market considers your home to be worth. Does that answer
Okay.
your question? Yeah.
Yeah,
W-
yeah.
w-
Thank you.
Okay, anyone can offer, let's say someone wants to sell a home by the water, and someone says, okay, and the seller says, okay, I want to sell my home for $1 million. And then the buyer says, okay, I'd like to, I really want to buy it. And then another buyer says, oh, I would like that home too. You want to sell it for 1 million? I'll offer you 1,100,000. And the seller says, okay, well, that's pretty good. I mean, the second buyer is offering more. Then the first buyer says, no, I want that house. I'm not going to let him take it. So I'll offer you 1,200,000. So that can happen. It does happen. And therefore, that value, which goes up and goes down with the desire of the market to buy it or sell it, is not compatible with an assessed value. An assessed value, for the most part, should remain stable, but it will go up as the value of properties go up, but not in the same ratio nor in the same amount. But there are two values that that buyers and sellers should be aware of. One is the assessed value, which is what the tax guy feels your home is worth. And the other value is what the market feels your home is worth. Very often people have always said to me, okay, this is the list price. It's in the computer. It's in the multiple listing service. This is what the seller wants. What is the assessed value? If that assessed value is very low and the market value is very high, that buyer may say, nope, I'm not interested because the buyer is asking for too much. It should be maybe a little bit more than the assessed value, but not much higher than the assessed value. Not everyone is bound to pay taxes. Religious organizations, if the state owns the building, it's the police, or where the police are, they don't pay taxes. Nonprofit, homestead, schools don't pay taxes. Some benefits are given to military people. If you are a disabled military person, you may be exempt from taxes. You won't have to pay taxes. Your service to your country, they consider to be sufficient, so they don't ask you to pay. Homestead is a concept that we have here in Florida, where a person who lives in a home and is a resident full-time pays less taxes than those people who come from outside of the state and don't live here. This is a formula to determine what you would pay in most locations. I just lost that for a second. Oops. Okay, this might work in a certain community. I wouldn't really know, but take notice of the word millage. The millage rate comes from the Old English, and this is the way in which at least Florida, South Florida, determines what it has to pay. Go back to this. The purpose of this chart, this formula may work. I'm not really quite sure because I haven't been there when they determine it. But a mill is 1/1000th of a equal to 1/1000th of a dollar. And therefore, what happens is they'll say, okay, your rate will be 3 mills. Your taxes this year will be 3 mills. They give you out that number. Most people have no idea what it is. But the millage rate, you would have to put 3 zeros there, 0.008, if you wanted to figure it out. We do that in real estate. If you want to be a realtor, I have to teach you this, and you have to know how to do it, even though you'll never have to figure out someone's rate. But what it's called the millage rate, that is part of the tax collection. But really no need to know that. And that may vary according to many of you in different countries. There are special taxes for specific improvements. let me continue on. It is after 11, and I wouldn't be able to stay much longer. Let's go through these. We could pick up next week if there's any questions. You could always email me. This is a big community in more Central Florida called the Villages. This is the largest sort of retirement community. No one likes to pay taxes, so of course there's always some dispute over whether we should be paying taxes or not. But well, without taxes, who is going to pay for the police and the firemen and pick up the garbage and teach your children? Okay, this we've seen this before. Okay. All right. Let me. I regret that we got a little trouble getting started today, but I will make note of the fact that from now on we are supposed to be using Microsoft Teams and not Google Meet. Microsoft Teams, and that should be in the link that Sarah sent. I kind of didn't pick up the difference. I assumed I didn't. Again, my fault on that one. So from now on, we'll use Microsoft Teams, and hopefully we'll get started promptly at 9 for the next time. Okay, you have a copy of this in Moodle. I've asked you to review the multiple choice questions at the end of the chapter. We'll review them then next week. That'll be week 5. Will be chapter 5. Soon, probably after next week, we'll have to pick up 2 chapters a week because there are more chapters than there are weeks that we will be meeting. So we have to kind of speed it up a bit. But again, my idea was for us to get used to each other and to see how far we can go and how fast we can go, and then kind of put on the press on the gas a little bit. Someone had a question?
Professor, don't forget to open the quiz, please, so that I can do
I'm
this
sorry?
afternoon.
Huh?
Please don't forget to open the quiz.
Yes, okay, I'll open that for you. Okay. All
But
right,
I
if you
can
have
do
any
it.
questions, yeah. If you have any questions, you can use the WhatsApp to say I have some questions, because I don't, I should check the email, but everything's been coming into WhatsApp, so I consult that. But if you're sending me anything, also I sent you an email because the WhatsApp is not public. It's sort of it's not private. Everyone is seeing that. So if you have something, just tell me. You just email me, and I'll go right over there and take a look at it. Okay. All right. I wish you a very pleasant day and rest of the week. And again, any questions, let me know. And if not, then we will get started hopefully on time next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor.
Bye.
Okay, good, goodbye.